Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special dedicated webinar from Candy Space, the digital product experts, about a report that they've written called the Streaming 100. We're going to be talking through the results of this paper over the next 45 minutes or so, and joining us on the panel today are, in the order that I can see them, Tom, if you can start us off, please.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Tom Thorne. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Candy Space. It's great to be on the webinar with everyone today. Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much, Tom. Matt?
Hi, I'm Matt Simpson. I'm the Managing Director of Candy Space. I've been here a couple of years. We work very closely with ITV, as I'm sure we'll come on to discuss, but in a past life worked very closely with Channel 4 and BBC, not Channel 5. I need to tick that off the list. But as I was discussing with you earlier, I also worked on Home Choice, the pioneer of video on demand. So yeah, looking forward to the discussion today. Thank you.
To the audience, yeah, Matt and I were reminiscing about Home Choice, which was a little elegant. It was very cute, wasn't it? This little silver box, kind of resembling Apple's TV Puck, I guess, but slightly bigger than that. But it was one of the UK's first true on-demand platforms. Martin.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. I am Martin Briley. I am with Tom, co-founder of Candy Space, and I'm charged with overseeing the customer experience that we deliver to our end users. And I like to think that I was born to this, because when I did my GCSEs and A-levels, as my mother keeps telling me all the time, I did them in front of the TV. Mainly, I think, in those days before CG, it was Captain Pugwash, which probably has a lot to say about my sense of humour.
Captain Pugwash was faintly subversive, right, Matt? Martin.
Well, I think one of the key things was that one of his deckhands was called Master Bates.
Indeed, yeah. Thank you very much, Martin, on that lovely note. Tom, for the audience, for the people who are watching this webinar that don't necessarily know much about Candy Space, can you give us your elevator pitch? Can you tell us a bit about the company and who you work with and what you do?
Absolutely, yeah. So Candy Space, we develop digital products. Our vision is all about developing digital products that are loved by everyone. And when we say everybody, we mean our clients who employ us to support them with their digital needs and transformation. We mean our clients and customers and users, and we mean the talent that come to work with Candy Space. So it's that trio that's really important. If we get that mix right, we make a product which is successful, which is used, which is utilized, and becomes culturally relevant in the industry that it's created for. And we do that through identifying the business needs of the customers that we're working with, and marrying that through our sweet spot process with their customers' demands. And we use insights, data to guide the creative, the UX, and the technology that we implement for those end customers. We've been working in broadcast and content delivery ever since we started the business. Originally, we started the business as a mobile pure play, and that was in the good old days of WAP. So we were actually responsible for helping to deliver things like mobile TV through the operator networks. And as the business evolved and things like the iPhone came out, obviously that provided a huge opportunity to start delivering amazing content through amazing experiences with a sort of technically robust back end. So shortly after that, we became a partner of Samsung's, helping them deliver content to all their devices. And shortly after that, we also became ITV's partner, and we've been on a journey with ITV over the last 11, 12 years, helping them build their VOD proposition. Initially, that launched as obviously a very small catch-up service called ITV Player, and it's evolved enormously ever since. And I guess one thing that we've always done ever since that we've created that product and other products like it is to be sort of really focused around the value proposition that takes place between the brand and the customer, giving them things that are relevant in a way that's easy to discover, easy to use, and ultimately a brilliant experience for them through the devices that they're consuming it on.
And I think one thing to add to that, Kauser, to
Yes.
interject, is that we've always had, partly because of our different backgrounds, we've always had this rigorous focus on the marriage of creative vision and technology. And I know everyone talks about this, but actually, particularly in the area of VOD and streaming, it's absolutely essential to get that experience right, and to get that marriage so that you actually deliver both to the end consumer and to the business.
Great, thank you very much. That was a long elevator ride, Tom and Martin, but it is a good précis of what you do. Matt, the first question, I guess, about the Streaming 100 report is actually, why don't you give us an introduction to it? What is it? What did you cover in the report, and why should people be reading it?
Sure. Well, as Tom said, Candy Space's vision is to create digital products that are loved by everyone. So firstly, we wanted to try and celebrate the streaming platforms that are loved in the UK. And what we found interesting going through this process of trying to rank many different streaming services. So of course, these days, it's not just populated by the more established and major players like Netflix and Disney and Amazon, but there's arts organizations, sports bodies, radio players, all getting in on the action. So we wanted to try and find a way to try and objectively assess the popularity, the engagement, and the usability of these platforms against each other. So that's
I must say, I mean, obviously I deal predominantly with video rather than audio and the other verticals in there, and I don't know that I've ever seen a report that is topical in the sense that it looks at the performance of streaming products over the past year, but also B, that it does, as you say, objectively compare services from different sectors against each other. Tom, as Matt said, there were 3 indices that you used, 3 categories: popularity, usability, and engagement. Can you tell us a little bit more about the modus operandi there? What was the methodology?
So we obviously looked at key metrics for each of those subsections. I'll cover off engagement. So we looked at in-app session time and monthly active users for engagement in particular. We used various data sources, similar web data, I think, predominantly, to actually kind of gauge how users are engaging with those products, and how often are they coming back with them, how much content are they consuming, all that kind of stuff. Usability, we created a score using both technical and kind of deep dive UX tactics as well. And obviously popularity is based around download numbers, predominantly taken from App Store metrics. And I think those download numbers are all taken from the last 12 months and contain re-downloads as well as sort of initial downloads.
Yeah. And Martin, what were your sort of top level findings in terms of the top, say, 50 or top 20, or even the top 100 as a whole?
I mean, I think what it didn't actually expose massive surprises, but what it did was endorse why things are good and why things are bad, on the sort of technical level and on the engagement level. So I think what one knows, for example, about great user experience through Netflix is that they're using their AI, they're using their recommendations engine, they're using experience around the data that's given them learnings around user experience to deliver absolutely great content discovery. What we also found was that at the lower end, some of the sort of obvious tricks and skills that can, or technologies that can be brought to play were really missing. And it's surprising actually at the lower end how poor the experience was, both on a technical level and on a user experience level.
Yeah, the poorer end being the bottom half or the bottom end of the 100. Yeah. But nonetheless, they made the 100 anyway, regardless of whether...
Well, we looked at over 200 platforms in total, both audio and video. So it's a very wide range, ranging from obviously, not just the sort of obvious streaming platforms that we watch long form on, but also social platforms, TikTok, YouTube. So it was a really interesting broad reach.
Yeah. Two things actually, Matt. First of all, forgive me, I forgot to ask if anybody has any slides to show. If you don't, that's okay. We can always edit them in afterwards. I'll get them from you guys. But one question I had is that given that you've objectively compared these streaming services across these various different verticals, how much learning is there from one to the other? So for example, Martin, when Netflix first came into the market, lots of companies in the industry will tell you that everybody suddenly said, I want to be the Netflix of something, of pets and sports and wrestling, that kind of thing. Was that an objective thing about learning from Netflix and being able to take that experience and saying, actually, you know what, they do it the best, we should be doing it in a sort of similar way, even though we're not necessarily in video streaming, we're in music streaming, we're in arts and culture. You're nodding, which is a good sign. Matt?
No, absolutely. And look, it's no surprise that the likes of Netflix, Amazon, and Disney Plus featured near the top of the rankings. But it's very instructive to see how, firstly, traditional players are fighting back. So, you know, ITV Hub features just outside of the top 10. I suspect with the launch of ITVX, if we do this again next year, it will feature higher. But also, you know, radio players. And to your question, I think Netflix, Amazon, Disney have set the benchmark in terms of the type of features that users expect on a streaming platform. And we can see radio players, and we work with Global, trying to ensure that they deliver that same quality of experience and same quality of features. So, for example, a user absolutely expects that if they join a live radio program that's being streamed through the Global player, that they can go back to the start and jump to any point that's previously happened. Like that's behavior that's absolutely common to anyone using Netflix. And yeah, it shows through the report that other businesses have to deliver that same quality of experience.
I think what's happened, Kauser, just to build on what Matt said, is that various sort of industry firsts have happened from lots of different players over time as the technology and capabilities have evolved, right? So, you know, you might get someone in the early days saying, I want to be the Netflix of, or whatever. But, you know, as other platforms have evolved and brought new innovations and new features, then obviously other people want to copy that. So ITV were the first people to do live menus, for example, where we were streaming straight into the menus, you know, the TV, which obviously really endorses the broadcaster's kind of proposition and what people expect. And that coupled with new features that are being released from, you know, Apple and Google and the other kind of, you know, predominant platforms that these are being consumed on, allows you to be very technically innovative. So at different points, it's probably different people saying, I want to be the you know, brand of this type of content delivery. And I think the experience is sort of then raised every time someone does something new. So every time someone does something new, if you look, you know, dial into Netflix right now, it's got live menus. You know, they were obviously inspired by, you know, what ITV and others have done subsequently, and that's what's driving the industry forward, is the innovation and the competitive nature.
And that is interesting as well, isn't it? In as much as there's a lot of diversity, even though you can say that there is a common toolbox of features and functions that could be used across different services, there is still a lot of diversity. And we know this in as much as if you think about using a search engine, you will say, I'm going to Google it. You'll just automatically do it. It's synonymous with being a search engine. Whereas if you're streaming something, you don't automatically say, I'm going to Netflix it, or I'm going to BBC Sounds it. There's no similar verb, Martin.
Yeah, I don't think there is, because I think, as you say, there is such a diversity of actual content, and it all emanates from the content. And I think one of the things that we, certainly that I and our team and the UX team focused on, was what actually is what are the differentiators around that. And it's not just about the content, it's actually about the ability to discover the content. And I think one of the things that, you know, for example, we focused on with ITVX is that it is very much about a place to discover content. So trying to understand what that means. And it's interesting, you talk about Netflix as a sort of benchmark. Netflix have done some interesting things around accessibility, around their ethical approach to the discovery of content. So, for example, the autoplay at the end of series doesn't happen anymore because it helps people to avoid binge viewing. So that, for example, might be thought of as something that TikTok might consider.
Yes, I've got to say, go on, sorry, Matt.
So I was just going to add to that point that while content may bring in subscribers or viewers, given the choice on the market now, isn't enough to always keep them there. So the quality of the experience and the discoverability of the longer tail of content that sits on those platforms is absolutely critical.
Sky has a story, actually. They did a survey of people that had churned from their service, and they asked, why did you churn? A, B, C, D, E, whatever the number of different factors were. And one of the biggest factors was that we couldn't find what we wanted to watch on your platform. And then Sky actually showed them that that content was available on the platform. They just hadn't found it, or that Sky itself hadn't been perhaps good enough at surfacing that content to those viewers and making it discoverable. Martin, what was the thing about Netflix and binging? Can you just repeat that bit?
Yeah, I think at the end of box sets now, you don't automatically go on to the next box set. Ah,
right. Okay.
So whereas previously you did. So in an attempt to stop you binging too much, I mean, also you look at the way that content is presented now. Not only do we have to consider lots of different choices. And the audience want those choices, whether it's through a subscription model, whether it's through advertising, or whether it's through the episodic presentation of the content. So, this sort of return almost to TV viewing, where you see one episode per week and it's released on a Monday.
Yeah.
So that sort of diversity of the delivery, of the type of delivery and choice within the delivery of content, or acceptance of the content.
Yes, and on that point, Tom, as well, given how long you guys have been in the industry, in my head, I've often sort of thought of innovations as, well, the way that streamers work and their models and their UX as kind of almost like oscillating waves, that there's been convergence and divergence in the way that services have evolved over this time. And it's curious, isn't it, that video streaming services in particular are becoming much more like old school broadcasters now. Whereas broadcasters for years have been striving to become like OTT streamers.
Absolutely. Well, everyone's learning from each other as the market evolves as well. So, and I think that partly goes back to what is your content proposition and what is the breadth and depth of that content proposition. So, you've got kind of niche players who are just delivering, one kind of content, whether that's kind of sporting content or it might be, cultural content, up to people like YouTube that, anything you want to view, it will just build you your own personalized TV experience. Basically, you can sit there all day and watch it. And I think that's where people like Amazon Prime, for example, and YouTube have got such enormous catalogs of content. That's kind of, it's a blessing and a curse as well, because it's quite difficult sometimes to find what you want on there, unless they're using quite complicated algorithms to actually guide you as to what you might want to watch at what point in time with what context. And so, we're now moving to a model where, broadcasters are producing both short form and long form pieces of, content, whether those series or one-offs. Some of them are as short as just a few minutes long, and others are obviously, kind of a traditional half hour or hour length. And I think it's that sort of diversity of content experience which is actually really interesting, and that's the next sort of pinnacle of innovation. And then coupled with the behavioral change in dual screening, there's so many people that are playing games and watching content while the game is loading, or just dual screening because they're playing a game and watching something at the same time. As that starts to evolve, it changes the content currency. And what you're watching on a particular platform and consuming on your mobile, for example, might be very, very different from your appointment to view in the evening, where you're watching, something on your connected TV or on your Apple TV. So it's a really fascinating sort of ecosystem that's partly evolving in line with how we start to change our behavioral patterns, but also how prevalent HD content is able to be streamed into the home and when you're out and about.
Yeah, but hold on. So hold on, how do I phrase this? So it's a chicken and egg question here, that how much are the streaming services responding to the behaviors that they think that we have right now? In other words, for example, as you say, dual screening, or finding different content types of using different business models across a service, versus how much they've conditioned us to behaving this way. So Netflix, going back to Netflix, forgive me, is a good example, because is it almost because of Netflix that we binge now? Did that behavior exist in quite the same way in advance of Netflix?
I don't think it probably did. I think they were the pioneers of being able to binge watch, a show at all times at once, unless it was a repeat of something.
I do. Yes and no. I mean, obviously, I couldn't binge watch Captain Pugwash, but I could binge watch box sets, and that's where they were physical DVD box sets, and that's where Netflix started. Don't forget. So I was able to go out to the video store and rent or buy a box set. So binge watching pre-existed streaming. I think. So go on, Matt.
Well, I was just going to jump in and say, I think that the platforms are starting to realize that they need to cater to different user needs at different times. So it's very interesting that ITVX, as well as investing very heavily in the discoverability of content, also launched 20 fast channels. So they acknowledge that for some people at some times, that lean back experience is actually something they really value, and actually they don't want to be searching through hundreds of different box sets. Similarly, Spotify, they can't rest on the laurels. You'll see them near the top of the streaming 100, but the traditional players are coming back. Those big platforms are having to continue to invest in the discoverability of their content, in different ways of consuming it. I love the new feature on Spotify that's a friends mix. So instead of just curating stuff you've listened to, curate stuff from friends you're connected to. It gives you a playlist based on that. Just that sort of innovation around how you can surface and discover new ways of listening or viewing content. I think it's critical to keep those platforms at the top.
That's absolutely right, Matt. And I think that applies very much to the audio world as well. Obviously, we work with Global and their player. And looking at the way that radio and podcasting are developing in parallel speaks very much to that. I want to listen now. It's a different experience to the I want to catch up or listen to a podcast.
Yes. Just to finish off the Netflix binge thing, by the way, as you may know, we wrote a report about binge watching last year with Whip Media, and one of the questions we had in the background that we didn't actually put in the report was about the psychology of binging. And there was a sort of analogy with, the marshmallow test that is given to young children, that they're left in a room with what is it, that there's a jar of marshmallows in front of them, and they are given one marshmallow, and they are told that if you eat that one marshmallow in the first 15 minutes, you won't get the jar. Whereas if you can actually hold on and deny yourself for that first 15 minutes and not go for instant gratification, you will get the whole jar instead. And there is, as I say, an analogy there between that and binging. On ITVX, Matt, how did, not necessarily talking about ITVX specifically and ITV, or indeed about Global Player, but again, there is an analogy between both of those, which is that if you have so many different content types, so ITVX, for example, is launching, I think, 7 different content types, isn't it? It's live TV, simulcast, video on demand, box sets, BritBox, fast, digital first, well, digital premieres. When you have that many different content types, and Global has podcasts, music, written, spoken, etc., as well, how do you solve that conundrum about getting the right content to the right viewers at the right time? How have the companies in the streaming 100 done it?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it comes down to how well you know your customers. So, to use ITVX as an example, integrating their AVOD and SVOD proposition into sort of a single proposition is a big part of their play, and they actually have big ambitions around doubling their subscriber base. Over the course of the next 3 or 4 years. So actually that intimate knowledge, the data about how people are consuming the content that you've got, and then using that to create smart recommendations and curate the experience for each individual user is critical.
Martin?
Yeah, and I think I would add to that, the constant pursuit of better through optimization and A/B testing, multivariate testing within the platform is absolutely critical. None of these platforms stand still, and that's why it'll be exciting to do the same exercise next year and see who lands up at the top and who lands up at the bottom, because actually it could very well change. There's so much movement in the market and so much learning to be had from each of the platforms and their new offerings.
Yes.
And everything we're talking about now is all sort of made up of both the experience and all the kind of back-end data services and analytic services that the brands have inside the products as well. So, Netflix have always been heralded as, having the sort of put just your email address, that's all we're asking for in sign up, whereas if you go to some of the other platforms, you're expected to put so much data in at the beginning, and it's just, there's a massive drop off, and brands might say, oh, we need that data, but it's about, as a brand, creating intelligent ways and intelligent value exchanges in order for your users or your customers to want to give up that data. And if you look at how businesses like Amazon have evolved, they've really evolved how they're messaging, how they're managing your expectations very, very carefully through the application, so that you're not disappointed with their latest, design updates around the pricing of content, what's free, what's paid for. And as more and more, VOD and audio services will need to diversify their business models because they're all chasing the same customers for the same buck, then, that becomes a really interesting dynamic place to play in, where you have to really never disappoint the customer through your technical delivery of content. You've got to have an application that basically never crashes and is always, able to be opened and accessed with whatever your connection. And then on top of that, you've got to have amazing content. So, it's amazing really that we've been able to review 200 services who are actually able to deliver content to customers. And anyone who's made it into the streaming 100 has done absolutely brilliantly, because it's a complicated business to be in an extremely competitive marketplace where customers have a massive expectation around excellence.
It's a really nice current example, a topical example of that value exchange is Spotify's Wrapped. So at the end of the year, you get a beautifully designed experience around what you've been listening to and the data around that. But it's become of such value that this year Spotify are actually advertising that Wrapped is coming on a big billboard campaign. It seems to have that much value to their customers. Mine always gets skewed by my daughters listening to Disney Gene. But it's a really nice way of using the data that they get and delivering something of value back to their customers.
Yeah, my goddaughter was here a couple of weeks ago, and now BBC iPlayer is only showing me RuPaul's Drag Race episodes. They know me so well too. Tangential question. You guys have been talking a lot about data and customer expectations and not managing them, but addressing them, exceeding them as well. Is there not space though for a sort of genius type figure to instinctively come in and figure out how to do this, like we would imagine that Steve Jobs did with the first set of iPhones? Yeah, is there?
Are you thinking of Elon Musk?
Oh no, God, not him. Yeah, but somebody from from a UX perspective, sort of an utter genius who would just figure it out and say, actually, you know what? We're not just going to go with data. We're going to go with the gut. Because here's the thing with TV streaming, particularly with broadcast, with movies and television, there is an alchemy there. It's not just about responding to data, because otherwise every single thing that Netflix put out as one of its originals would be a super hit, but it's not.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because actually, you know, a lot of this, of course, resides in the content itself rather than the content discovery.
Yeah.
And Netflix increasingly use algorithms to determine the outcome of the scripts, and it isn't working. So you're right; it still needs the human touch. It still needs the creative genius with some vision and foresight. But I guess what you would hope is that the data allows you to limit the risk and reduce the odds without over determining the result.
Yes, that does make sense, actually, Martin. Yeah, that if you're hedging, then you might as well use at least some data to help make your decision.
So I was reading today about a whole new branch of stress called algorithmic anxiety, which is a real thing apparently. So it's basically the fear that online recommendations are actually dulling your own individual tastes, and that you're sort of beholden to them. And I think, like being able to create different ways, as I said, the example around Spotify and using your friends to curate recommendations, different ways of surfacing content that might be of value to you, and thinking about how to do that is critical.
The absolute truth is that most people go onto platform for the first time as a result of word of mouth, but it's then and then they'll go and see a piece of content that has been recommended by a friend or whoever. Yes. And that once they're on platform, the job is actually to keep them on platform and to keep them exploring with interest, and then hopefully for them not to churn. I mean, the big battle is churn.
How much is it the user's job to get to know how to use that service versus the way that the service curates and presents not just the content, but the actual experience entirely?
Well, isn't that the heartland of the purpose of the application? It's about, you know, the holy grail is the onward journey, right? You know, that's what everybody always talks about. How do we create an onward journey from watching a piece of content to keep people watching more content? Because that's obviously, or listening to more audio, that's obviously the objective. So I think it's probably up to the providers, the content broadcasters and audio broadcasters, to work extra hard in providing things in a way that's palatable to users' discovery. And I think the more comprehensive that can be in the ways that you can do that. So that goes into things like usability. So how much control do I have over the data that you're collecting over me? How much trust do I have with your brand? That's a huge part in maintaining a relationship. And that's where traditional broadcasters who are moving into, you know, OTT have a big, you know, advantage, because they're well-known brands that people love and trust, that have huge cultural relevance, and that you've, you know, grown up with them for many years. Whereas some of the sort of new entrants that are coming in that aren't so trustworthy, potentially social media businesses that are, you know, have been proven in the past potentially to be you know, not acting with people's best interest, or kind of, you know, not acting in ways that are perceived as trustworthy. So I think that there's a huge opportunity for people to have a great degree of transparency in their promise to their customers around how they're using their data, whilst at the same time creating something that is as effective as possible as guiding you through that onward journey. And then in the content proposition that sits around that, it's how well do you know your audience is, and is the content that you're producing and the content investments that you're hedging against going to be right for your audience in 12 months time? Because obviously it takes a while to produce content and get it to market.
I mean, in answer to your question, really, Kauser, you just have to read the report, because those platforms that have the highest popularity, engagement and usability are giving you the answer. Because actually, to keep people on platform, to keep people engaged, to keep them finding new content that they're interested in, you need to hit high scores, particularly on usability, but certainly on popularity and engagement as well, because the popularity will breed word of mouth. That if you look at the report, that's what we're delivering.
A sort of quick fire question, and we won't make it political because I'll park ITVX and Global over here. They are your clients. Which are your favorite streaming services? Matt? Across any vertical, by the way. It doesn't have to be just music or just video.
Yeah, I've sort of given it away by referring to it with about 3 different examples. I'm a very avid Spotify user, and but not just because of the access to all of the obscure bands that I used to like in the early 90s. But again, the quality of experience on that and the recommendations and the journeys that I can go on of discoverability, I just think fantastic. So yeah, that's mine.
One of the last things I listened to on Spotify was Firewoman by The Cult, which I bought one morning in 1990 when I still had hair. Tom?
YouTube. For me, every day I listen to all of the podcast content on YouTube. I've got a premium subscription. I watch loads of content on YouTube. I download it, and I think it's an amazing platform that keeps me in that onwards journey that everybody wishes for.
Does it help? Is that rather, what was the question? Is it influenced by the fact that you've got young children?
No, it's influenced by the fact that all of the content that I like is available to me in the niches that I'm interested in, and the fact that I find the recommendations, the way it surfaces content in connected to the things I'm interested in, absolutely brilliant. So I get loads of interesting content discovery.
You see, the thing is, I love YouTube as well, but I'm annoyed by how accurately it knows me. I'm pissed off about that. I mean, I go to YouTube and I find the coincidences spooky, if I'm being nice, and positively Orwellian, if I'm feeling a bit more dark, I guess, about it. How that has it been listening to my phone calls that it knows to play me this video at this point or to bring it up? We will leave my conspiracy theories on this one side. Martin, what's yours?
I would actually say BBC Sounds, because just not necessarily in terms of the content, but in terms of the user experience. I think it's so clever, and always was from the get-go. The fact that it sort of replicates in a way the radio dial, the fact that there's this intuitive interface, and that actually I can find the content really quickly. Yeah, I think that's really good. I think there's something interesting about the iPlayer as well, although it's somewhat now antiquated.
Yes,
definitely a bit of a reboot. But to your point, it doesn't serve up. It doesn't have that sort of. I'm not conscious of the AI-driven, data-fed recommendations.
Yeah,
and it's a simpler, less diverse content offering, but it's still quite easy to find.
Well, I mean, the last time I spoke to the BBC about their content recommendations was a long time ago, and at the time they were using a mix of algorithms and human-based curation, so it wasn't just one approach or the other. It was a sort of nice hybrid. BBC Sounds, Martin, when it first launched, had not the greatest press. It had a bit of a bad rep.
I think they brought it forwards, and I think it's very good. I think it's originally, of course, there weren't podcasts on it.
Yeah.
So now it plays both. It offers both live streaming, it offers catch up, it offers podcasts. And it's all easy to find.
Yeah.
And it's got great, in terms of our usability ratings, it has very, very high accessibility.
Yeah.
So, it's very good for a very wide audience.
Well, it's a public service broadcast app. I mean, you would expect it to have great accessibility. We've only got a few minutes left. Sorry, I thought one of you were asking questions, but we've got about 4 minutes left. Let's have a quick chat about business models, because we haven't, I don't think, covered those off yet. Now, a few years ago, subscriptions. I say a few years ago, I'm talking pre-pandemic. Subscriptions were the thing. It looked like subscriptions were going to take over the world, that every piece of digital content that you could consume would sit behind a subscription wall of some sort. Advertising has come roaring back over the last couple of years, certainly. And is that A, something you recognize? You're all nodding, so I suspect you do. But B, what's the confluence of factors there that has made for this renaissance in advertising supported services? Tom?
I think it's largely been driven by the moves from social media businesses into, what is the kind of more traditional broadcast territory. So, the time that you're talking about pre-pandemic, TikTok wasn't really so prevalent. Facebook's and Instagram weren't delivering so much video. They're predominantly kind of starting to go in that direction now, and they're acting as discovery sort of portals in their own right. And because they are, ad businesses and they don't, pretend to be anything else, then it's created a bit more competition in that area. And I guess the other thing is obviously that now there's just so many more services in general that you can, get video from. So therefore, with competition, there has to be a way into trialing something. And that's often an ad supported or ad funded tier. Consumers, who are outside the industry think that they get their TV for free, whatever TV is to people these days. And I think there's still an expectation around that, especially in the early days of a relationship. If you're Disney, you've got enough exposure around your IP to move straight into the market and demand a subscription because people know who you are. That's not the same for everybody. So it's probably partly consumer expectation, partly platform driven, and partly the competition that's going on for the same customer.
So it's the polygamy of advertising versus the monogamy of subscriptions. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that there's only so many there's only so many eyeballs out there in the UK. Yeah. And they're all competing for them, and they all need to onboard people, even if either they're an ad business that wants to scale the number of ads or that they want to start selling them a subscription. But the easiest way to get someone in is to provide something for free or notionally for free. Yeah. Which is ad supported.
No, I think, to the point we were talking about earlier about knowing your customer, there's you know your customer far better as a streaming service than you do possibly on the TV in the living room. You have more granular data about their behaviors and their watching habits, and that's very appealing to advertisers. Yeah. So the value to advertisers of their streaming platforms is potentially greater. I think also the ways of displaying the advertising. You look at the way that we initially did a lot of work before subscription on ITV Player, and there was a lot of kickback from viewers around the ads midstream. Yeah, they hated it. But now, of course, it's common on YouTube to be interrupted by the ads, however annoying it may be. And
albeit that they're skippable and they're only 5 seconds.
Yes.
Well, not all of them, but
not all of them. But yeah. So they're trying something different there, and actually to Tom's point, which was around how social has changed the way we view. I think that's equally the same about the way we view advertising.
Matt, just to end then, I mentioned oscillating waves earlier and convergence, divergence. Will subscriptions come, not to pun it, but just will they come streaming back? Will subscriptions have its heyday again, and people will get tired of adverts and be willing to pay for subscriptions again, or is that done now pretty much?
I think again it's about offering people the choice, to Tom's point, and actually it's been compounded by a cost of living crisis. Like how many subscriptions can any household sustain? So you have to make some choices. It's been well documented, the slowdown in subscriber growth for the major VOD platforms. Lots of evidence around consumers being a lot more promiscuous about, okay, I'll sign up for a month because I want to watch this, and then I'm unsubscribing and I'll go and subscribe to something else. So I suspect, the fact that Netflix, Disney, Amazon have all launched cheaper priced ad-supported tiers isn't something that's going to go away. They need to continue to offer that choice to customers.
Yeah. Excellent. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for this. To the audience, thank you very much for tuning in. The video of this session will be available on the VOD Pro website from next week if you want to watch it again or if you want to share it. Thank you again for tuning in, and thanks to the panelists.